Hi, this is Tree from So Many Stadiums. This week's review is Alabama, the Crimson Tide. So before we go into the stadium and the tailgating experience, let's talk a little bit about Bama's bona fides. They've got 13 to 17 national championships, depending on how you want to count them, more than 24 SEC conference titles, over 70 consensus All-Americans, and 2 Heisman Trophy winners. Not to mention, it's the home of coaching legends Bear Bryant and currently Nick Saban.
People in Alabama name their children Saban and Bear and horrible.
In fact, let's be honest, it's hard not to argue that Alabama is simply the best football program in college football. Their record speaks for themselves. Of course, the school ain't exactly the Harvard of the South either, so you can't have everything. Alabama is located in Tuscaloosa, which isn't really near anywhere unless you consider Birmingham somewhere. Even then, it's still about an hour and a half drive to get to the campus. And let's be honest, the inaccessibility of Tuscaloosa has been a historical problem for Alabama. In fact, up until the 80s, they played 2 to 3 home games a year in Birmingham. And if you've ever been to Legion Field in Birmingham, you know it wasn't the aesthetics that brought them back, because that place was a dump. So once you get to Tuscaloosa, it's a standard college town, so it's okay. The hotels are plentiful, but they're all going to be expensive on game day. Hard to fault the Tide there, though. That happens everywhere.
The whole city smells. All of it just smells bad.
The Tide calls Bryant Denny Stadium home. It's one of the largest in the country, befitting the stature of that program. There are scoreboards in every corner of the stadium, so you're going to have a good view wherever you sit. Additionally, there's seat backs on the whole lower tier, so as long as you're sitting in the shade, you're probably going to be pretty happy with your seat. And I'm not joking about the shade, because SEC games in September suck. That's the only way to describe it. Extremely hot, miserable, not a lot of fun. So when you buy that ticket, make sure it's in the shade. Else you're going to look like the brat you just ate at your tailgate. So you'd think with Alabama's winning tradition that tailgating there would be a legendary experience. Well, the reality is not so much. They do have a spot on the quad, which is not unusual. Lots of schools have spots on the quad tailgate where you can go for free, set up your stuff, and have a good time. Lots of people do, but they're probably locals because you've got to either drop your stuff off Friday night or Saturday morning, go back, park your car someplace else, and then come back over. Which is fine, again, if you're local and you've got a group of friends that do it every weekend and you can organize all that. But if you're a visitor, it usually all falls apart on Saturday morning when you've got to wake everybody up after drinking all night Friday night. So there are other places to tailgate on campus, but the lots are expensive and they don't have a whole lot of charm. Speaking of charm, I noticed that jorts are still a strong wardrobe staple on campus, even if they've fallen out of favor in the rest of the world. To be fair, once we got inside the stadium, the crowd was mostly khaki shorts and polos and sundresses. Maybe there's a no shoes, no shirt, no service policy at Bryant Denny that I wasn't aware of to kind of clean up the crowd. Nonetheless, Alabama is certainly an experience from that perspective. So once inside the stadium, the experience at Alabama continues to be, well, pedestrian. There aren't a lot of traditions as far as I could tell. There's one common cheer, which is Alabama first down, roll Tide, which is, I mean, it's okay, but you hear, versions of the first down cheer everywhere you go. So it's not exactly unique. But the absence of tradition isn't really the problem at Bama. It's the level of competition. Now, I know they play in the SEC, and that's the best conference in the country, but let's face it. For every game against LSU, there's a game against Arkansas, and those games are awful.
To this point, they have never beaten a ranked Auburn team. Sorry, I correct that. They've beaten one ranked Auburn team at home, ever.
The fact that the game is more often than not going to be a dog, combined with the fact that there aren't a lot of traditions, means that it doesn't really stack up well with the traditions and the experience at some other places like Penn State, Michigan, Texas A&M, where you've got good games, great tradition, lots of easy tailgating. So it comes up a little bit short.
But if it's not the Auburn-Alabama game, Tuscaloosa is a pretty miserable place to be.
So my visit to Alabama was just as I described. Nice fans, good seats, but a boring game. Quite frankly, it was fairly average from the start. We didn't get to tailgate on the quad, so we were stuck in one of the empty lots towards the back. Now, there were people tailgating there, and there were some rigs there, but it wasn't near what I've seen at some of the other stadiums I've been to throughout the country. The only thing that was interesting about my spot was Fraternity Row was on the other side, and I could see a horde of blazer-clad young freshmen leading a group of attractively attired young ladies back to their frat house before the game. That pursuit of young love was pretty amusing, but I don't think mom and dad had anything to worry about. These weren't savvy seniors. These were awkward freshmen. The only people less likely to score than these guys was going to be the Ole Miss offense, which we were going to go into the stadium next to see. Well, you can imagine our surprise when we walked into the stadium to see not only had Ole Miss scored, they were up. This was the end of the first quarter, and we were surprised, thought, hey, we're actually going to get a good game. And sometimes that happens with rivalry games. Alas, Saban put his foot on the gas. They scored 31 straight points, and it was all over. And quite frankly, you can understand why the student body likes to leave at halftime. I mean, the second half was, it was torture, and we were in the shade. Now, I know Saban says they can't get anybody to play him at Alabama, but I'm guessing if he called Appalachian State, they'd be more than happy to do a home-and-home with the Crimson Tide. But I guess Nick's not going to want to play those guys. So that was my experience at Alabama. Let's hear what a few alums from Auburn, their rival, have to say about the Alabama experience.
Okay, this is Cliff Triplett with SoManyStadiums.com. We're covering Alabama this week, but we've got a couple of folks from the Cal College down the street, Auburn, and we want to get their comments on Bama. So first question, Coach, what's the best thing about Alabama?
I'll tell you, Cliff, it's a good one to start off with because it's a trick question.
Tell me.
Nothing good. It's easy. Easy one. Nothing good.
Nothing good.
Nothing good.
I guess it's good that people in the state of Alabama who can't get into Auburn have a place they can go to school. Oh gosh, again, I think it's just because they're jealous that they didn't have a good enough ACT score to get into Auburn.
So you're saying Auburn's a better school than Alabama?
That cannot be debated.
That's factual. That's not argumentative. It's factual.
Katie,
we really shouldn't hit below the belt. It's too easy to take those shots. That's like picking on your little brother. We really should just stick to football. It's not fair.
The real problem is all of the Alabama fans that never went to school anywhere, much less they didn't go to Alabama, they didn't go to Auburn, but they are the most ridiculous Alabama fans that do things like poison trees and.
So that one was sad. That was I'll say a fan, not alumni, who decided he would figure out a way to try to inflict pain and torch a landmark. There's one level of like being dumb, and there's another level when you call and confess it on public recorded radio. It's just
on like the most popular radio show in the state.
He said they have never beaten us at home. That is, and we have the winning record in Tuscaloosa.
You hate Alabama. You hate Alabama. You want to bite them, girl. Yeah, you do. You want to get it. But
have a great
War Eagle.
War Eagle.
War Eagle indeed. So, not surprising to hear Auburn fans rubbing it in a little bit against Alabama. They have a spirited rivalry, and it's one of the best in college football, particularly the Iron Bowl. That's probably the game you want to go to if you're going to go to see Alabama. So when you put this all together, you say, where does Alabama really sit at the end of the day? Like a producer from ESPN told me, it's really not that good. And that's about where I was going to score it. I wasn't going to put it on my must-see list. But then, you sit back and you think about it and you go, wait a minute. They got more national championships than anybody else. It's where Bear Bryant coached. You got to go to Bama. There's no question. So go. Just adjust your expectations. Try to get to the Iron Bowl and not Ole Miss. But either way, it's a must-see on your college tour. And there you go. Roll damn Tide. That's it for this week. See you in the cheap seats.